I am Vibha Chauhan and welcome to Chauhan classes Funda Clear. So in this video, I'll explain the theme 2 of class 11th history, that is writing and city life. So writing and city life. Now in the theme 1 we talked about the human evolution, and now we'll see about writing and city life. Basically in this chapter we'll have a look at civilization, that is Mesopotamia, or the land between two rivers. Now those two rivers are Euphrates and Tigris. So in this chapter we'll have a closer look at Mesopotamia, its city life, the significance in it, and we'll have look from different aspects and perspectives in this chapter. Now if we talk about city life, the first reference to city was made in the Old Testament of Bible, that is the book of Genesis. Now in the book of Genesis it has been written that when there is so much corruption on the earth, there will be a very large flood and everyone will die, and God you could say God has personally chosen Noah, a person named Noah, for saving people. Now he will make a very big boat, like he will definitely make a very big boat and will take a pair of each and every species and would save them, and after that he would create a city. And you know what, that in that testament of Bible, the city that was mentioned was Sumer, that means Sumer in language. So you could say that Sumer meaning Sumer in that language. And around Mesopotamia we have found, the archaeologists have found the same thing, but you know what, that in clay tablets the name was different. In Old Testament of Bible the name was Noah, that person, but here it was Jerusalem. So you could say that the name was different but the stories were obviously the same, and that is why many excavations started in Mesopotamia. Now you know what, that from 1840s many excavations even for decades were there in Mesopotamia. Now you have to notice that no site in India has ever seen such large excavation for a decade. A decade contains 10 years, you might know already. So you could say that in Mesopotamia we have found so many evidences, many artifacts, and the writing documents as well. We have found the written documents on the basis of which we can say many things about Mesopotamia. Now Mesopotamia merely means a land between two rivers, and those two rivers in between that Mesopotamia lies are Euphrates and Tigris. Now Euphrates is on the western side and Tigris is on the eastern side. Now you know what, it Mesopotamia in Greek language it is formed by two words that are, first is mesos meaning you could say between or middle, and Potamus. The Potamus in Greek language means river. So middle of river or the land between two rivers it generally means. So you could say that excavations started from 1840s and they remained there for a decade, and after that we have found so many evidences, so many things. You know what, because of the Old Testament of Bible, now many archaeologists had a curiosity, and that is why many excavations took place in Mesopotamia, and once they started they found many evidences and they had to continue, because as long as they can find the evidence they have to continue, don't they? So you could say that we have a closer look at this civilization or city of Mesopotamia. Now in Mesopotamia we have two main cities that are Uruk and Mari. So we'll have a closer look at these cities as well. First we'll look at Uruk and secondly we'll look at Mari. Now let's start the chapter with the first topic, that is Mesopotamia and its geography. So Mesopotamia and its geography. Now when we discuss about Mesopotamia, first of all we'll have a look, then only you know what, that after learning the geography and political things we can learn economy as well. So we have to connect the different spheres like geographical point of view, political point of view, economical point of view. Now when we talk about Mesopotamia's geography, it is a land between two rivers that are Euphrates and Tigris. now in present time it is in Iran country. You know what, that it is present in Iraq country, and some part of it lies in Kuwait as well, but mostly it is in Iraq country. And you could say that earlier there was no such country because there were rivers and there was land, there was civilization, but as the time passed they converted into countries, and that part lies in Iraq, just the same as Indus Valley lies mainly in Pakistan. Now at the same time when Mesopotamia was found, now we can say that evidences show that at the time when Mesopotamia was there were 4 main civilizations of the world and the earliest civilizations of the world, and that are, first is Egypt. In Egypt around Nile River we have found evidences of civilization. Then comes our Mesopotamia in you could say between the rivers Euphrates and Tigris rivers, and afterwards we have Indus Valley civilization, that is in India, you could say around Indus River, and most part nowadays is in Pakistan. After that in China too we have found a civilization, evidences of civilization more specifically, that is around Hanghu River. So you could say that these were the 4 civilizations of the world, and they were around the same time. It's not like that they were far different from each other, because we have evidences showing that there were trades going on between these civilizations as well. So we can have a look that we can say that these were around the same period of time. Around the same period of time doesn't mean that exactly at the same period of time. It's not like that in the same year they were formed and in the same year they became extinct. There might be some difference around 100 years, or maybe more than that, or maybe less than that, but yeah, they were around the same time. And now when we have Mesopotamia, it has its significance as well, because it lies as a crossword between Egypt civilization and Indus Valley civilization, because it lies between these 2 civilizations, like in the middle words it is. So whenever a trade has to be taken place between Egypt civilization and Indus Valley civilization, then they will have a similar point, that will be Mesopotamia, where trade would be going on. Like they would have a common point. Like for example, if there are 3 points, collinear points, you could say that on the same line they lie, A, B and C. Now A is the first point, let's see, it is Egypt, and C is Indus Valley civilization, and B that lies between A and C is Mesopotamia. So whenever trade has to take place between A and C, they will have to go to B, as it is a common point, and there they will take they will do their trade. And as Mesopotamia has been allowing that trade, now it can ask for tax as well, and that would lead to its economy as well. So we can say that is how a city that we'll discuss later, that is Mali, developed. Now when we talk about this, you could say that geography of Mesopotamia, that in the northern parts are the steppe, upland, you could say that upland, there is an upland that is steppe. Steppe, you might know that are the grasslands in that area. So we can say that the steppe, there is in the northern part of Mesopotamia, they were steppe, and that is why there were not that much performance of agriculture, because there were no fields there, as there was merely grasslands. Now in the northern part of Mesopotamia, as there were more grasslands, it would be all obvious for livelihood, to make a livelihood out of sheep, goats, out of you could say the domesticating animals, because now many people became pastoral, like they were now herding animals, so that because grasslands were very good, grasslands and low shrubs were very good for feeding sheep and goats. So after winter, around the rains, they would feed their goats and sheep onto the grasslands and low shrubs. Now moving on, we have northeastern part of Mesopotamia. Now in the northeastern part of Mesopotamia, there are undulating plain lands and mountain ranges. As there are mountain ranges, those mountain ranges are tree covered as well, and that is why around 7000 BC to 6000 BC there are evidences of some agriculture in that part as well, because you know what, there are mountain ranges, there would be rainfall, there was enough enough rainfall for supporting the crops, for supporting the growth of crops, and that is why agriculture was performed in that region. Now moving on, we have the southern part of Mesopotamia. Now the southern part of Mesopotamia was mainly a desert, but still the most of the agriculture and the cities Uruk and Mari lie in the southern part of Mesopotamia, and agriculture was mostly performed in southern part. Now how is that even possible? Like in a desert, how would it go on, as there is no rainfall, that much not rainfall? Now there are two rivers, as we talked about, that are Euphrates and Tigris. Now Euphrates and Tigris flowed to the southern part of Mesopotamia and carried a silt. You could say loads of silt, that is fine mud, and that fine mud is very fertile for growing crops. So as it flowed from that southern part of Mesopotamia, it had loads of silt that was deposited in that region, and that is why growing crops could go on, could be continued further. So you could say that is why agriculture was mostly performed in the southern part of Mesopotamia, even though there was not enough rainfall for supporting the agriculture, but still there was. And in the next chapter we will also see that is the Roman Empire, that is about the Roman Empire, that in the Roman Empire, the most productive area was Mesopotamia and the southern part of Mesopotamia. So that's about the geography of Mesopotamia. In northern parts, we have the steppe. In northeastern part, we have, you could say that mountain ranges. And in the southern part, we have our Uruk and Mari cities, and we have like desert areas. Now, after that, when we talk about Mesopotamian geography, there is another point of view as well, like we talked about its literal geography. But apart from that, as Uruk and Mari cities lie in the southern part of Mesopotamia, then obviously that part of the civilization would go on, would be you would have development as well, as there are big cities, they have some improvements, they have agriculture produce as well. That is why there will be development and they will emerge as big cities as well, and definitely a city life would now be started. Now before starting the city life of Mesopotamia, let's see what city life means with the next topic, that is the significance of urbanism. So the significance of urbanism. Now what do we actually mean by city life? Now city life doesn't mean that having just a large population, but it can be contrary as well. It could be like city lives have large population, but that doesn't mean that whenever there is a large population it would become a city life, it would become a city. It's not that. Now in a city, what is most important, that the economy of city is not merely focused on food production. Besides food production, there would be manufacturers and service sectors, so any other service as well. So that only it can become a city. Now for becoming a city, it's not like it should only have food production. Besides food production, there must be some other activities going on as well, then it can be called as a city. And that is why you might have noticed that you could say that in the city that you're living in whichever city you're living in, doesn't matter, you might have seen that agriculture is very low in that area compared to manufacturing, service sectors. Now service sector, you might know that professions, different type of professions. Now in earlier times there might be professions such as cobblers and many more professions like carvers, engravers, scripts, but now we have different professions as well. So you could say that, and in rural areas you might have noticed that people, around 90% of the people are focused, have occupation, their livelihood from agriculture. So we can see that this is the main difference from city life or urbanism and rural areas. Now besides this, in a city there is a division of labor as well. Like for example, we have example of now time as well as of that time as well. Now for understanding this, we have to take an example, that is Now in present day, whenever you go to a shop to buy something, like for example a shirt or a t-shirt, that t-shirt, that retailer shopkeeper might have bought it from a wholesaler. Now that wholesaler has not produced it, he would have bought it from a factory. Now that factory might have got its fabric not from itself, it might have bought it from a farmer. So you could say that it becomes a long chain from farmer to factories, and then to wholesalers, then to retailers, and then to consumers. So it is a very long chain, and that is why we can say that is what is called as division of labor, that all activities are not performed just by a single person. And we have an example of Mesopotamian time as well, that is, you know what it, a carver, you know, that who carves on different items, you could say. Now a carver needs bronze tools and lapis lazuli. Now lapis lazuli is blue stone and shell is white stone. Now furthermore, in this going on this chapter, we'll have to cross these words as well. Now he would need stones, you could say colorful stones like lapis lazuli and shells, and besides that, the most importantly, he would need bronze tools. Now bronze tools would be occupied by a bronze tool maker. Now bronze tool maker would not have the metals by himself because he doesn't know about the work of mining, and he would also need charcoal or fuel for making a shape out of those metals. So he would not have any knowledge of mining. Then how can he get these items? Definitely it's obvious that he would have to buy these things from somebody else who sells metals or charcoals and fuels. After that, for lapis lazuli and shells, for colorful stones, he would need to go to different seller. The carver would have to go to different seller. Now from example of this, we can see that in this example there is a division of labor. It's not like that single carver is making the bronze tools by himself, is getting the charcoal and fuel by himself, and also the colorful stones. The only work that he needs to do is the carving. So why does he need to go that far? He can buy those things from different people as well. So we can see that a long chain keeps coming up, and that is called as division of labor. So that is the significance of urbanism. We can say that it's not like that every city is a city that because it has a large population, not because of it, because there are spheres of different economic activities like transportation, manufacturing, service sectors, those kind of things besides food production, and there is a division of labor that can be seen. That is why we can say that is known as city life or city. Now as there are more and more division of labor, there would be another thing rising as well. As there would be so much buying and selling between people, then obviously there would be a need uprising into the minds of people to keep written records of them, as we'll see later in this chapter as well, but we can have a kind of overview of it as well. Now you know what, that as you could say that whenever there is so much buying and selling people on that large amount, you could say that because the significance of urbanism includes social organization as well. Social organization, as for a single person there would be so many things coming and going on, so there would be social organization, and in that social organization fuels, bronze tools, in that particular example bronze tools would be kept on. So social organization are needed for storage on a large amount, and for you could say that sending them to somebody else as well. So for that large amount of storage, we need to keep some written records as well. So for keeping written records, we need to have a knowledge of writing, and that is why we have named the chapter as writing and city life. So we could say that there must be a kind of need uprising into the minds of people about written records, because because a person's memory capacity is not that much. What if somebody you could say forgets that he has bought from this person or he has sold to this person? Then disputes would arise and so many things can happen. So there must be a need of written documents or written records going on. After that, we have the next topic, that is the work ahead. The work ahead. Now the worker head was found in this civilization when excavation took place. This worker head is admired by the people, by the you could say the sculptures over the world, because of its perfect shape of chin, of nose, mouth, you could say these kind of features. Now basically this worker head is a sculpture model and is a head of a woman. You could say her eyes were made out of lapis lazuli, and on her head we find some carvings. That must be because there might be some ornaments. Now till now there might be some, that after many years we have found these sculptures, these artifacts, so definitely there might be some damages on them as well. That is why those ornaments have not been found, but yeah, there are evidences there were ornaments on the head of that woman's head, this worker head. So you could say that this is admired by people all over the world, as it is a very good sculpture model. Just thinking about it, even at that far age, even at that period of time, around 2000 BC, 3000 BC, people knew about architecture, about sculpture, about carving things. So that itself is a very good thing, isn't it? Like those people who started writing and now they are having sculpture models and these kind of things. So this itself is a very great achievement, and that is why it is kept as a very good important artifact. After that we have the next topic, that is movement of goods into cities. So movement of goods into cities. Now no doubt that Mesopotamia has so much abundance production of agriculture and textiles as well, because it kept animals like the people of Mesopotamia kept animals like sheep and goats. So definitely from their fur textiles can be made as well, and from agriculture, from cotton and jute, there were you could say fabrics and clothes being made as well. No doubt it had abundance of agriculture produce and textiles, but in the field of mineral resources it was the level of zero. You know what, that there were no mineral resources in Mesopotamia like jewels, metals and many other mineral resources like copper, tin, zinc. They were not found in Mesopotamia, even in any region, and that is why archaeologists have thought that they might have traded their agriculture produce or textiles with people from Turkey and Syria in exchange for their metals and jewels, for making ornaments, jewelry, for making, you could say, cards. You know what, in Mesopotamia there was some availability of wood that were from date palm trees and many other trees, but that were not that much strong to keep a hold of cards, for making many other things like cards, making bullock carts, different kind of things. So because of it they were in need of stronger wood, and that is why they might have traded it with the people of Turkey and Syria in exchange for their metals, or you could say jewels and wood, for different things, for mineral resources, so that they can keep on their activities. The Mesopotamian people could keep on their activities. After that, yeah, they have traded with the people of Turkey and Syria, but for trading from people of those far distances there was a need of quick transportation as well. For transportation in our times we always think about animals like camels, bullock carts and those kind of things, but those animals can't be rode everywhere, and there is another thing as well, that they would need to be fed, and that is why the cheapest way of transportation is by the water route, as there were Euphrates and Tigris river. That is why by channels of these rivers, through the channels of these rivers, transportation could be taken place and trade could go on. Like people would make boats, and from the channels of Euphrates river they would go to the other countries and would go keep on their trade. So we can say that in Mesopotamia there was trade going on, and it was for their own benefit as well, and a quick transportation was needed, and that is why from the channels of Euphrates river it was going on. And we will see later in this chapter as well about Mary, where this thing happened. So we can say that was about the movement of goods into cities. No doubt there were so many agriculture things produced and textiles, but there are things needs of other things as well, like women would need jewelry, there would be need of potter's wheel, there would be need for making carts and many other things. Even for making boats there were need of wood. So if there is not good quality of wood, then what about if the boat would sink down in the river? So there were those kind of risks as well. So we can say that in Mesopotamia there were movement of goods into cities. Now into cities here means that Mesopotamia was a civilization. In that civilization we have found many cities. The most important words are Uruk and Mari. Just as the same in India. In Indus Valley civilization, what you see that there are many cities like Lothal, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Kalibanga, Dholavira, those kind of cities. So this same is happening in Mesopotamia as well. Now one benefit if we see of Mesopotamia was of writing. Of course writing, because you know what, that we have found many evidences of writing of Indus Valley civilization as well, but that cannot be decoded, that are still not decoded by the people. But Mesopotamian language is understood by people, by archaeologists, and that is why we can find many different things about Mesopotamian time. So you could say that is why Mesopotamia is a step ahead in this matter of Indus Valley civilization. After that we have the next topic, that is the development of writing. So the development of writing. Now we have to discuss about the writing system of Mesopotamia region. Now you know that Mesopotamia there were needs of writing uprising as well. Like for keeping the records of transaction, it was necessary for a writing system to be developed. Now when we talk about writing, what do you actually mean by it? You might know that every society has its own language. And what are languages? Like languages is verbal communication to convey their message. Writing is also a part of verbal communication to convey the message with some visible signs. So writing is also part of it. Now writing developed in Mesopotamian region around 3200 BCE, that is before Common Era. So writing developed in Mesopotamia around 3200 BCE, and the first writing evidences show that there were 5,000 signs of oxen, fish, bread, loaves. There were different signs for different things, like for number of boats. So you could say that there were around 5,000 signs. Now earliest way of writing must be like that. There might be some symbols or signs for showing some kind of things. So for showing some kind of transaction between a person to another person, that might be of grain. So they would use this kind of symbol or this kind of sign. So earliest time there were 5,000 symbols or signs of animals like oxen, fish, and other things like loaves, breads, these kind of things. Now when we talk about writing, how was writing performed, how was writing done in Mesopotamia? Like there weren't paper, were there? Now they had a writing system developed on tablets. Now tablets, does it mean electronic tablets? Like in that area, at that time, there were no electronic tablets, but they were clay tablets. Now they are different, totally different. The electronic tablets that we use today are different from what we have found from the past. But both things share one common thing, that is they have some information. Now earliest clay tablets in which writing was done. Whenever a person has to write, now for writing a profession was there, that was of a scribe. So a scribe would wet a clay tablet and would it shape in a rectangular form and would make it as a shape that would be comfortable in holding one hand. So that he would make a shape out of clay by wetting it, that would be a shape that he can hold comfortably in one hand. After that, he would cut its you could say edges obliquely, so that it wouldn't be sharp and it wouldn't harm the hands of the person who is holding that tablet. After that, some signs would be written down on that tablet. That signs would be wedge-shaped cuneiform signs. Cuneiform, you might know that you might have seen a nail that is a kind of triangular, that is we will say that its width is more in the upper part and it decreases. So the same shape is used for every sign, like if for making bows, for making grains, for making everything. Wedge-shaped or cuneiform signs were used in the clay tablets. And when we talk about the language of Mesopotamia, then the first language around 2600 BCE was Sumerian language. Sumerian language, that was of the city Sumer, that was widely used in Mesopotamia, or mainly Uruk that we will discuss later. After that, it was replaced around 2400 BC, around 200 years after, by the Akkadian language, as Akkars came into that region. So their language became widely common. Although most of the signs were same, just the names were changed. Okay, so you could say that around 2400 BC, Akkadian languages were not used during the time period of Alexander. So you could say that during that time, you could say that language was widely used during the time period of Alexander's coming. So you could say that in Mesopotamia, the language that was used was Sumerian language. It was replaced by Akkadian language and commonly used that. So you could say that in Mesopotamia there was a system of writing that developed, and that is a very good thing as well. Now the most important fact here is that when we compare it to the contemporary Indian civilization, that is Indus Valley civilization, we have found signs and many symbols in Indus Valley civilization as well. But that writing, that language cannot be decoded, cannot be understood by the archaeologists even now. But for the Mesopotamia, they are understood very well. So that is a very good fact of Mesopotamia. So you could say that in Mesopotamia it was like that. Okay, after that we have the next topic, that is the system of writing. Now we have seen that there was development of writing, but what about the system of writing? Now when we talk about system of writing, it was very complex. Like in the modern days, we have consonants and vowels. We have single sounds. Like in English alphabet, we have M as consonant sounds, like B, C, D. These are consonant sounds. And in vowels, we have A, E, I, O, U. But during that time, in Mesopotamian time, they were not consonants or vowel sounds, but they were syllable sounds, like put, or, in, la, these kind of sounds, that was syllables. So it was very complex to remember these many syllables and to make a word out of it. So that was why scribe rose as a profession, because scribe itself, being a scribe, was itself a very big profession, as you would have to have so much knowledge about these syllables, about making words out of them, and remembering them was also one of the biggest tasks. That is why you could say that it was very hard for the people. After that, you know what, that when a clay tablet was wet, what happened was that it had to be, everything that had to be written was written very fastly, very quickly, so that if it dries, like if that tablet dries, then it would not be written. Like for example, you know what, that when a clay tablet has been wet and cuneiform signs have been written on it, but after it dries, it becomes as indestructible as a pot, as an earthen pot, as a thing made out of clay. So you could say that is why every sign had to be written down before that clay tablet dries. And another system of writing is that for each and every transaction, no matter however minor it was, for every transaction, separate clay tablets were made, because you know that once a tablet has been made, no other information can be added on it because it becomes dry. So how can we even write on it? So you could say that is why for even the minor transaction, however minor it was, doesn't matter, separate clay tablets were made, and that is why during the excavation period of Mesopotamia, there were several clay tablets that were formed. Like you could say that were found by the archaeologists. Now, besides the use of writing that was for keeping the record of transaction, there were another uses as well. For making the dictionaries, it was used. For giving legal validity for the land transfers, it was used. And after that, we could say that clay tablets were used for the kings as well, for making for writing the deeds of the kings. And if a king had changed many laws, and if a king had brought any policy, or had gone out into a war and had defeated the other party as well, it would be written down in a clay tablet as well. So it was used for different purposes as well. After that, we have the next topic, that is literacy. So literacy. Now, if we talk about literacy of Mesopotamian culture, now what was literacy? Now you know what, that not all the people of Mesopotamia were literate. Only a few of them knew how to write and read. That is why when a king had learned to write or read, it would be described as a very big, great achievement, and it would be written down in one of his boastful inscriptions. So you could say that not all the people of Mesopotamia were literate, because as I've already told that there were so many signs, it was very complex, and remembering them was one of the biggest tasks. That is why when a king had learned any, you say that write or read, it was one of the part, it had become one of the part of his boastful inscriptions. That is why scribes' profession was very hard for themselves itself as well. After that, we have the next topic, that is the uses of writing. Now, as we have already discussed some of the uses of writing, like keeping the records of transactions, making a dictionary, and many more uses, but there is another aspect to it as well that has been shown by an epic long poem of King Anmarkar, one of the you could say the earliest leader or ruler of Uruk of Mesopotamia. Uruk, that is, you know that in the southern part it lies. We'll have a more closer look in the next topic. Now, in that poem, it has been shown that King of Uruk, that is Anmarkar, King Anmarkar, wanted to buy some lapis lazuli and some shells, that is white stone, for beautification of gods, of temples. Now, you know what? During that time, temples had so much value among the people that they could do anything for the temples. Like they could do the work even for 24 hours just for making a temple. So you could say that during that time, temples had their own value. Even today they have, but during that time there was just another level. That is why he wanted to have a beautification of temples. That is why he sent his messenger to a very far distant land known as Arata for exchange of goods, for buying the lapis lazuli and shells. Now messenger had to go for such a long distance by his foot, on his foot, because the route that he took was so much like there was so much terrains, so much mountains that no other transportation could be used. Like during that time there were no airplanes, so that he could not fly to that place, and he could not go through bullock carts, through carts on horses as well, because the terrain was so much terrifying, so much hard, rough. It was not smooth, and that is why he had to travel that long journey on his foot. Now he had to go through mountain ranges, and at a point when he reached a mountain range, the people who were living in a village below that mountain range, the village is known as Sasa, were just like a mice to them. you could say that people looked like mice to that messenger, as he was at such a height that those people looked so small into his view of perspective. After that, after so many days, you could say that after so much long journey, he went to Arata. He met his ruler, and after that he conveyed his message. Now in such a long exchange, there were many messages that had to be conveyed to other parties, and that is why that messenger had to go from A to B to B to A, and again he had to go. That is why the messages were mixed up by him, and now he was so tired of all this. That is why King of Uruk decided for a written document to be sent to the king of Arata, and that is why on a clay tablet he wrote down all the conditions for the exchange, for buying and selling, and everything that he wanted, and every message that he wanted to convey, that he wanted to send to that king. Now that clay tablet, that messenger took that clay tablet and went through the same region. After that, when the king of Arata was shown that tablet, saw that tablet, he was just so amazed, so terrified. He was like, his face was worth watching, you could say. Now he was so amazed, so shocked, so stunned that it has been expressed so good in this epic poem. Now, however, this poem is not true. We all know that it is an epic poem, but yeah, it is considered that kingship was the authority for maintaining the writing and city life, for maintaining writing, trade and city life in a city. In Mesopotamia particularly, we were discussing. After that, you know what, the kingship had to maintain its superiority as well, and during that time writing was considered as a superiority. Like we have seen that the king of Arata's face was worth watching. Why was that? Because of writing, he was so shocked. That is why we can say that writing was superiority during that time. So that was a use of writing as well. After that, we have the next topic, a very important topic, that is urbanization in southern Mesopotamia, temples and kings. So urbanization in the southern Mesopotamia, temples and kings. Now we have got a very important topic here, that is from the perspective of temples. During that time, temples had their just own value at a different level. Like temples are a house of God, so definitely they had so much value among the people that people would do anything for making temples, for beautifying temples and everything. Now with the perspective of kings, we'll see that as well. Now in the southern part of Mesopotamia, there is a city, that is Uruk city, where we had talked about it earlier as well, where King Enmerkar lived. So we could say that Uruk city is located in the southern part, or was located in the southern part of Mesopotamia. Now around 5000 BCE, temples were started to be built and rebuilt by the early settlers. Now you know what, as time passed, people became permanent settlers and settlement began. Now settlement was started by the people. After that, we have three kind of settlements. First was that you could say that around the temples there were settlements. Second was that trade institutions, like temple was as a trade institution, they were the main trade institution, and there were settlement around it. And third is about imperial cities. Imperial cities, you might know that have war and those kind of things. So in this chapter we have a look at first two, that are seen as trade institutions and around the temples. The third one we will discuss later, not in this chapter, you could say. Now, you could say that temples were started to be built and rebuilt around 5000 BCE in southern part of Mesopotamia, or more specifically in the Uruk city of Mesopotamia. Now, earliest temple of this city were made like a small shrine made out of unbaked bricks. Now, that is the difference that we have got between Indus Valley civilization and between you could say that this Mesopotamian civilization. That you know what, that in Indus Valley civilization during the same period of time, there were houses and temples made out of baked bricks. They were stronger, they were more useful than this Mesopotamian culture. Now in Mesopotamia there were temples made out of unbaked bricks, and we have two gods here that are, first is a god of moon, that is Ur, and second is that goddess of love and war, that is Inanna. So these two were the deities that were worshipped by the people. Now the early settlers offered curd, grain and even fish to these temples, to these gods. Now how we can say that these, because we have found, the archaeologists have found the bones, fish bones in such a large amount in temples, that we can say that they were offered by the people to the deities, to the gods, to their statues or idols. After that, you know what, that in Mesopotamia as temples were built, there was another structure, a unique structure of temples as well. They were not like ordinary houses, because they were not the houses of ordinary people, they were the houses of gods. And now in Mesopotamia, temples had walls. Those walls at regular interval were in and out. Like for example, for 4 feet they would go out, and then they would go in, then out, then in. So there was a pattern of in and out at a regular interval that made it you could say not ordinary, extraordinary you could say. After that, when we talk about temples, they were worshipped by people, and people could do anything for the beautification, like using lapis lazuli, using shells. They were used so much in such a large amount. Now that was about the temples in Mesopotamia. What about the problems in Mesopotamia? Now when we talk about the problems in Mesopotamia, there were two types of problems in Mesopotamia, that were, first were natural problems and second were man-made problems. Now natural problems, like for example, if river Euphrates changed its course, and what if there was flood? So you could say that due to floods, you might know that whenever there is a river at a certain period of time, there would definitely be a flood, and that is why whenever Euphrates had changed its course, it made problems for people, and whenever there was flood, it also caused problems for people. Now there was another type of problem, that is man-made problem. Like a river is flowing and there is upstream and downstream. You might already know about these terms. Now people living in downstream and upstream had conflicts towards each other, because those people living in upstreams were, what they were doing, that they were blocking the way of river to the downstream people. They were changing the course of the river to their own fields. They were making the irrigation canals and were making it like this so that silt would not be deposited to the people living in downstream regions. So that made conflicts between these two groups as well, because now there was some group of people that took the advantage of their position, and what they did was that they changed the course of the river and made it like this so that the main deposit of silt would be only in their irrigation fields, and they also made so many irrigation canals that would not be left for other people as well. Another thing was that there were so many victorious chief war leaders as well. Whenever there is a war between two cities, what would happen, that the defeated cities people would be taken out, and they would be you could say that marked as slaves. And why was it so? Because of influence. Now you know what, that for example, if Uruk city had defeated any other city, what they did was that they took the people of the defeated city and made them slaves of themselves. Now as they were made as slaves, then what would happen? The Uruk peoples, you could say that the people of Uruk would have so much influence, and most important, the chief leaders would have so much influence specifically, because those chief of those cities were having influence, wanted influence among the people. That is why whenever there was a war between two cities, and the loot from the defeated city would be distributed among the people of the victorious city, so that chief would have the popular support of those people, of those local, and he would have an influence as well. After that, those slaves were working as for making temples as well, for building temples as well. Now in temples, when we discuss specifically, they were worshippers of deities, of god and goddesses. After that, what happened that these temples emerged as trade institutions as well. After time, what happened that processing of grains, like for example pressing of oil from seeds, making a processing, you could say, that was being started in temples. And after that, as time passed, there were settlements around temples. So you could say that now in a temple many activities were going on, like processing of you could say food, fabric, cloth, and pressing of oil, grains, you could say, and many other things. And you could say that after a long period of time we have found evidences of clay tablets that in temples there were these activities going on. Now I'm saying these things, why is it so? Because we have found evidences, the archaeologists have found evidences of clay tablets. Whenever grain or lands were allotted to a person, they were written down as a document on the clay tablets, and that is why we have found several clay tablets in this site. So you could say that no site ever in India has gone through these so much excavations. So it might be because it has its own importance. So you could say that is why during that time many things were now going on in a temple. Now temple became large as well. It's not like they would be still a very small shrine. Now there were several rooms, there were courtyards, there were big rooms, you could say, and as for walls, we have already discussed, they were in and out pattern. After that you say that when we talk about temples, you could say that we have found evidence that one of the temples took around 1500 men labor, you could say, for 10 hours per day for 5 years. So you could say that for 5 years 1500 men were working, and for 10 hours per day. So that is a very quite large amount for work. So that is because of dedication of the people towards these temples. So you could say that is why during that time people were, you could say that people considered temples as very big things. Not directly or indirectly, they were working for the kings as well, as king had its own authority. Now after that, whenever some workers were doing work in a temple, now they would be allotted with rations as well. So it's not like they would not be paid with anything. Rations would be given to those workers working for the build of a temple, for building a temple. So that was about the usage and urbanization in the southern Mesopotamia. Temples and kings had their own kingship, had their own authority, and most importantly temples had their own kind of value in that Mesopotamian region, in the Uruk city of that time. So you could say that is why we can say that temples were very important in that region, in that period of time. After that, we have the next topic, that is the seal and urban artifact. So the seal and urban artifact. Now seals, you might know that like stamps that were used like this for stamping on something. Now in India we have already found, like in Indus Valley civilization also we found about seals, and that were very important as well. And in Mesopotamian civilization as well we have found seals. Now these were of cylindrical shape, like this kind of shape, cylindrical shape, and they were pierced through their middle point. You could say like if this is like this, if this is a seal, then from the middle, from this point they would be pierced, and after they are pierced, a stick would be you said that adjusted in that hole, and it would act as a roller. Like if there is a stick that is adjusted, then it would go like this. So you could say that a cylindrical seal was there, and it would act as a roller, as if you could say that as if there is a hole into it, as if it is pierced and a stick has been adjusted to it. So when it is rolled, whatever is carved on that seal would be you could say that would be you could say that printed on something other thing, like on clay tablet or any other thing. Like during that time there weren't any A4 sheets were there, so you can see that during that time there were clay tablets. So seals are also a very important artifact, as they also show like during that time what people preferred more and what they did give their value to, because seals, if they made, there might be some value to it as well. After that we have the next topic here, that is life in the city. So life in the city. Now till now we have discussed about the urbanization in the southern Mesopotamia, temples and kings. Now we have seen the first temple was made out of unbaked shrines, but now around 3000 BCE, now bronze was used in Mesopotamia region as well. So you could say that now bronze was used, and in many things like for making temples it was used, because the wood that was used for making temples was not strong enough. Now today we have pillars for supporting the roof, but earlier days there were wood in Mesopotamia, but in the contemporary there were bronze, you could say, as well. So now they were also using bronze as a pillar for supporting the roof of temples. Now after that we have to discuss about the life in the city of Mesopotamia. Now whenever we talk about a life in any city, in any region, everywhere, first thing that might come everyone's mind, that is about equality. Was there equality or not, or was there inequality? Now in Mesopotamia there were inequalities as well, like a few people had so much major wealth in Mesopotamia as well. Like we have found that with so many graves, like with so I think you say that with a part of graves, we have found that with those graves, with those bodies, so much gold, jewels, silver coins and daggers of ceremony, bronze golden vessels have been buried as well. So you could say that there is a concept life after death that was followed in Mesopotamia. That is, people believed that there was life after death, and that is why every person needed whatever was important, you could say that whatever was dear to him after his life as well. That is why those items were also buried with the body of that person. So you could say that those people that had so much things around their body, that means they were rich, but that didn't have were poor or maybe some middle class family. Let's not go into that field. After that you may have like another concept about marriage. Now according to the evidences that have been found, there was nuclear family in Mesopotamian region, in Mesopotamian civilization. Now we have found that nuclear families were in norm, and marriage proposal also, like we haven't found so much evidences about marriages, but yeah, we have estimated that firstly a person A and B, two person mainly A and B would decide to marry, and then bride's parent would give their consent. Like for example, A is groom and B is bride. Now bride's parent would give consent, and after that groom's parent, you could say that groom's people would give a gift to bride, and after that the ceremony would take place of marriage, in which from both parties, from A's parties as well as from B's parties, gifts would be exchanged. There would be different kind of gifts. After that vows would be taken and ceremony would go on, and after that when the bride is about to leave, you could say that some share of property from her father would be inherited to her. So you could say that some share of property would be given to that bride. Now that is very good concept. Like that, now that woman is not totally dependent on the married family. She can be independent as well. So that was a very good concept of equality between genders as well. After that, her mother-in-law would take her, and mostly in families, you could say that in most of the families, son and his bride would live with their parents, and in a family, father was the head of family, and for mainly father's property share, and you could say everything would be inherited by his sons. And after that, life in the city is about the town planning as well. What was the town planning in Mesopotamia? Well, compared to Indus Valley civilization, it was really bad. When we talk about town planning of Mesopotamia, then we have found evidences of narrow winding streets. Narrow winding streets that no cars could go on. on you could say that on those streets. Only donkeys could carry the items. You could say that whenever large amount of grains, firewood had to be given, had to be supplied to houses, it was very hard. That is why donkeys were used for you could say that for supplying those materials. Now compared to Indus Valley civilization, in Mohenjo-daro we had so much you could say wide roads, so many big and wide roads. That was a very good concept as well. Besides that, in Mesopotamia, what happened that there were roads that were very narrow, and the houses were also not built in a good condition. Like if there is one house, there was second house, third house, and not in a good parallelism, not in a good structure, you could say. And even the roads would not be good. They would be curved out. They would be made in a strange design, not in the right angle, straight way, straight. Streets were not straight, you could say, not right angles. There were no like round way, those kind of things. So structure was not that good. After that, when we talk about the sewage of a house, what about the drainage system? Drainage system was also not good. As there were narrow winding streets, then there is also a possibility that pipes could not be constructed. That is why each house has its own pipe made out of clay for the sewage material of the house, because for each house sewage had to, you could say that waste and sewage had to be excreted. It could not be held in a house, so that was made like this. And during the time of rainfall, you could say that the roofs of those houses were toward inwards, so that the water would not go on the streets, because if it goes, then this condition would be severe, you could say. So the roof of those houses were made as inwards, and after that they were supplied, you could say that they were transported to sumps and then finally to the pipes. And you know what, that in houses, whenever all the swept was done, like sweeping the floor was done, the old swept was just thrown onto the streets to be trodden by their foot, you could say. That was a very bad thing to do, and that is why when there was like uprising level of the streets, because from each house so much dirt, so much swept, so much waste would be thrown onto the streets. That is why after a certain period of time, the threshold of the house had to be raised up. That is why, you know what, that sun rays didn't come from the windows of those houses, but from the doors of those houses, as the levels had been raised up. After that, there were some superstitious beliefs of those people as well. Like for example, first one was that whenever there was a raised threshold of a house, then it would mean that house would be prosperous. Now that is the logic behind it. Like every house had to raise its threshold because of you could say that because of all that dirt waste on the streets. So definitely they would have to raise their thresholds. So that what is the logic behind it? Now you know what prosperous means here, that Mesopotamia was known. You know that Mesopotamia has a significance in 6 things. Was that prosperity was first thing, then city life, then literature, then mathematics, astronomy, and finally writing as well. Now you could say that first belief was that if the threshold of a house was raised up, then it would bring prosperity to the house. Like what is the logic behind it? Definitely would have to raise the threshold of the house. Second belief was that if you could say that if you open the house, if you open the door of your house, and if that door opens to another house, like if you open the house and see another house just right after you, you could say that right in the street of you, parallel to you, you could say that right in front of you, then it means that you're lucky. So you could say that if you could say that that's not it. Second belief was that whenever you open the door of a house and you don't see any other house, like you have opened the house and right in front of you there is no other house, then it means you're lucky. So what does it mean? Does that mean that neighbors would fight with each other? That is why they didn't have to be seen in front of each other, so that they would be lucky if they didn't see their face each other's in the morning. So you could say that the second belief was that whenever you open the door of your house, if you don't see any other house in front of you, you, that means you're lucky. Third belief is even more illogical to it. That is, you know what, that if you open the door of your house and it has been opened outwards instead of inwards, then that means that the wife of that house would be torment to her husband. So it means that whoever made this belief would have like fightings with his wife, I guess. So you could say that the third belief was that if the door of a house opened outwards instead of inwards, then the wife of that house will be torment to her husband. So you could say that these are some illogical beliefs from the scientific view, because how can that be even possible? Well, there might be some coincidence, but that doesn't mean that because of this belief this has happened. You know that even in 21st century people live, and what they think is that there are many superstitious beliefs into them. Like they tie some threads around their wrists, around their ankles, and they do some different kind of things. So even in 21st century, if there are superstitions, then definitely during that time there would be superstitions among the people. That's a very common thing. So that is about the life in the city. Now the next topic here is a trading town in a pastoral zone. So a trading town in a pastoral zone. Now till now we have talked about Uruk city in the southern part of Mesopotamia. Now comes another city, that is Mari city in Mesopotamia. That didn't specifically completely lie in the southern part of Mesopotamia, but in the upstream of the Euphrates river, and because of its position it was very well flourished. You could say around 3000 BCE. Around 2000 BCE it flourished so much. The royal capital of Mari flourished so much during the time period of 2000 BCE. Now in Mari region, in Mari city, you could say there were two group of people, not specifically two group of people, but two type of people. First were pastoralists, and second were farmers. Pastoralists who domesticated animals, who reared animals, and farmers who grew crops. Now you know what, and mostly there were pastoralists in those regions, but yeah, they were farmers as well, and they would exchange their goods as well. You know what, that in those regions, to the farmers there would be good amount of produce, surplus amount of produce, and to within the pastoralists there would be availability of meat, milk, and different leather as well, different produce. So they would need to exchange their trade as well, because in modern how trade takes place. Suppose if there is a farmer named X is growing so much produce, has so much produce enough for his family needs, but after 2 years he has surplus amount of produce, so he can't consume that much. He can trade it with some other things that are important, necessary for his survival. So you could say that is why trade takes place. So between pastoralists and farmers there were trades going on. But you could say that in some cases there were problems, conflicts between these two groups as well. Like for example, what pastoralists did was that they took their animals like sheep, and you could say that they took their sheep, go to the you could say to the fields of farmers and ruined their crops. Now in retaliation, farmers also did something like they would block the water route of there, so that they could not take, the shepherds could not take their you could say that sheep and goats to the water rivers or something else. So you could say that there were conflicts between these two groups always. We can't find evidence, can we, that who started, who ended, but yeah, there were conflicts between these two groups that has been formed on the clay tablets as well. Now in many cases what happened, that some certain groups also arose to the power and became rulers of Mari royal capital city. Like for example, those groups that ruled on Mari were, you could say that Amorites, Akkadians, Assyrians, Armenians. So these were the four groups that ruled on Mari city. After that, we're talking about Amorites. Now Amorites were different from common common people. Their way of styling, their way of clothing was different, and they also did work. Now you know what happened in Mari city was that Mari, as I've already told, that Mesopotamia lies between Egypt and the Indus Valley civilization. So whenever trade has to be taken place between Egypt and Indus Valley civilization, they would have to go through Mesopotamia. Now they would have to go through particularly Mari region as well. Now whenever a trade was going on for wine, for oil, for grains, for anything, then it had to be passed through Mari region, because it flowed to you could say that it was through the river Euphrates river. So whenever a trade boat was going through the river Euphrates, it would have to pass through Mesopotamia, and that's when officials of Mesopotamia, officials of Mari region would go and inspect that boat and see what there is, what the item they are trading with, and 1/10 of the amount of those trade items would be levied as tax for Mari region, because they're allowing them to go through their river, to go through their region actually. So that is why Mari flourished so much, not in the military campus, even though it didn't have so much military power, but it became so much prosperous because of this technique. And now Armatids that were ruling over Mari had a kind of thing. You know, there was a king whose name was King Gilgamesh. Now this King Gilgamesh had a royal palace as well. That was very wonderful. Now don't think that there were golden throne and like there were so much good things, there were so much good looking chandeliers. But even you know that during this period of time there were still tribes. But even in tribes, that palace was itself so unique. Now it has been shown that once the king of Syria came to that region just to see the palace. So you could say that it was a huge palace with so many rooms, with so much courtyards as well, bathrooms, lavatory and kitchens as well, and an audience hall as well. So that itself was a very wonderful, big, huge palace that people from far away came to just see that palace. Now besides these things, as pastoral zone here means Mari was flourishing, there was another thing as well, that the king had to be vigilant. Now there was always you could say that there was always a chance of attack. There was always a chance of attack. Anytime an attack could take place over Mari for its prosperity. That is why every time the king had hired some detective kind people to look upon any tribe that were coming to their region. So all the tribes, all the people, all the shepherds were allowed to come into Mari region, but they were looked upon as well. They were looked down sneakily, or maybe with leaving them they were looked upon. And we have found evidences as well, like say an official was saying to the minister that they had found some fire signals by a particular tribe. That means it could be attack signal as well. So every time there could be some possibility of attack on Mari. That is why the king had to be vigilant as well. So you could say that is how this pastoral zone, that is Mari, flourished so much. Like it has so much prosperity, even though it didn't have so much military power. Okay, the next topic that we have here is that cities in Mesopotamian culture. Now cities in Mesopotamian culture. Now I know what that cities in Mesopotamian culture were like that, when different groups and the societies kind of like that lived side by side, and they were shown through epics as well. One of the epic was of Gilgamesh. Now Gilgamesh epic was written in 12 clay tablets, in which it has been shown that he was the ruler of Uruk city just some years after in Merkur, and he was said to be a very heroic ruler. He is said to be a very heroic ruler, and he was so shocked when his heroic friend died. That is why he went out to find a road to immortality. He went through so many things, but came after to return to Uruk city. You know what, that we have left one thing here is that around Uruk city a defensive wall was made. As temples grew and there were trade institutions that grew, and as settlements began, a very big defensive wall was created as an outline border of Uruk city. You know what, Uruk city was expanded so much because of temples and kings. Like for example, if we have example, we can say that around it had been 250 hectares, just as double of Mohenjo-daro. You could say that has been found in India around the time period of 3000 BCE. But after that, around the time period of 2000 BCE, it had increased to 400 hectares. So that would be 4 times of Mohenjo-daro. So you could say that, and that is why defensive wall was also built, so that it would be defense for the defensive matters. Now that Gilgamesh returned to Uruk's defensive wall and you could say that saw its structure. Now he was so relieved to see the Uruk city, to see the structure of his palace, to see the structure of temples, to see the structure, architecture of that defensive wall. He now believed that even if he died, his sons would maintain the you could say that pride of that city. So you could say that those Mesopotamians had their pride when people lived together side by side. So that was the main agenda, you could say, of Mesopotamian culture. After that, we have got the last and next to last topic of this chapter, that is the legacy of writing. So the legacy of writing. Now there is really a legacy, literally the legacy of writing. Now from writing we have found evidence of literature, mathematics, astronomy. You know what, that science has to be carried out by writing documents, by written documents, so that it can be passed through to next generations as well. And we have found the evidences of mathematics as well, like of multiplication, division, squares, square roots during Mesopotamian era. And what we take for granted, the division of time, that means we have divided 2 years, decades, years, and in year we have divided 12 months. In 12 months there are 4 weeks in each. In 4 weeks there are 7 days. That we have take for granted. That was also from Mesopotamia. And when Alexander came there, when Roman Empire came there, then it spread to Europe and finally to us. So you could say that all this started from Mesopotamia, and mathematics was also started. That was why Mesopotamians are called the father of mathematics as well. So you could say that is why writing was very important, and mathematics was also a very important aspect, was a very good thing, developmental thing of Mesopotamia, as problems such as that there is a field of such and such an area and this much water has been flowed out, find the volume of water. So many questions had to be solved by the students, and now students were taught about the mathematics, and astronomy also took place, like the concept of lunar eclipse, solar eclipse were also written in the clay tablets. Although there were some theories given behind it, although they were not logical, theoretical, but yeah, they did have curiosity. They did try to find out the reasons behind the lunar eclipse, the solar eclipse. So you could say that those people of Mesopotamia were really good. Like they had astronomy, they had literature, they had mathematics, they had prosperity, they had writing, and most importantly city life. So you could say that was a legacy of writing. Even though when Assyrians came to attack on Uruk city, even though they were forcing their language, still the Sumerian and Akkadian language was preserved, and as library many tablets were still written. So it was a kind of library that was formed. So you could say that was a legacy of writing, as many things have been written, many epic poems have been written. You know what, even when a city has been destroyed by war, they were still remembered by poetry. So that was a good fact as well. So you could say that was a legacy of writing, the mathematics equation. Like even though those kind of equation that you might be very kind of hard to find, you could say that to do them without calculator. So those kind of problems were also there. So you could say that was the starting of mathematics, then it spread to other world, to other parts of the world, and then many mathematicians came up. So that is all we have discussed in this chapter. Now in this chapter we talked about Mesopotamia that was rich for prosperity, for city life, for writing, for literature, for astronomy, for mathematics. It had availability of date palms, it had availability of wood as well, it had availability of meat, milk, and those kind of things that were made out of pastoralist living, and they had availability of many other things, fish as well, but they didn't have any mineral resources for which they had to do trade with other cities as well. After that we talked about two cities that are Uruk and Mari city. Uruk that lies completely in southern part. You know that southern part of Mesopotamia is a peninsula region. Peninsula, that means covered by water from three sides. So we talked about Uruk city where temples and kings were there, and Mari city where there were pastoralists, and it flourished so much. It became so prosperous. So this is all we have covered in this theme, and you can say that I have covered all the topics and subtopics. So that's all for it, and for next videos, next chapters, next themes of this book will be covered in further upcoming videos. So stay tuned for upcoming videos. Thank you very much.